A church shaken. Pope Francis accepts the resignations of an American cardinal and Australian archbishop over allegations of sexual abuse. Religious liberty. The Department of Justice convenes a meeting of the faithful. Food for thought. Pope Francis delivers a message about leftovers. And the Pontiff Online. The Vatican launches a new app to help the faithful keep up with the Holy Father. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, July 30th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thank you to those of you joining me for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Theodore McCarrick, the former Archbishop of Washington, is no longer a cardinal. He was stripped of his title. The now Archbishop McCarrick resigned Friday night after multiple allegations of sexual abuse over a period of more than 50 years came to light. The Vatican ordered McCarrick to a life of prayer and penance until the accusations are examined in a church trial. Pope Francis also ordered the former cardinal to stay in seclusion. McCarrick served as Archbishop of Washington from 2000 to 2006 and served in Newark and New York. He is the first cardinal to resign in nearly 100 years. In 2002, then Cardinal McCarrick was a leading voice in the church's response to the sexual abuse crisis in the U.S. The Bishops' Conference ultimately issued a charter designed to protect minors from clergy sex abuse. 2 years later, the John Jay College of Criminal Justice reported 4% of U.S. priests faced allegations of sexual abuse between 1950 and 2002. This is the time frame of the alleged abuse by former Cardinal McCarrick. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley joins us from Rome with the latest. Juliet, Pope Francis was under pressure. He acted swiftly. What is the Holy See telling the press?
Lauren, Vatican spokesman Greg Burke told Reuters TV on Saturday the Pope wanted to send a powerful message. Here's what he said.
The important point is that McCarrick is no longer a cardinal. What this means is that no matter how important your position, no matter how prestigious, when it comes to sex abuse, you are going to be held accountable. That's the message being sent today.
So there you have it, Lauren. Zero tolerance for clergy sex abuse, no matter how important the accused person is.
Juliet, for those who have not been following the case, let's talk about the details of the accusations against McCarrick and how he has responded.
In June, the Archdiocese of New York announced that credible and substantiated allegations were being investigated into McCarrick's alleged abuse of a teenager nearly 50 years ago. Now, the victim's details are not being made public. Law enforcement in New York is also investigating the allegations, the Archdiocese is telling people. But, Lauren, other alleged victims have come forth saying that they too were abused sexually by McCarrick, who's now 88 years old. And it's been reported that settlements were reached with adults regarding previous allegations when he served as bishop in 2 New Jersey cities. Now, Lauren, McCarrick says he has no recollection of the abuse 50 years ago involving the altar boy, and he's declined comment on the new allegations, but he has promised to cooperate with the process.
Put this into perspective for us over the history of the church. When has this happened, if it has happened?
Lauren, McCarrick is the highest-ranking American clergy member to ever be barred from ministry on sex abuse allegations. He's the first cardinal to resign from the College of Cardinals since 1927. Now, in 2015, Cardinal Keith O'Brien of Scotland, as you may remember, renounced the rights and the privileges of being a cardinal after being accused of sexual misconduct. But O'Brien didn't officially leave the College of Cardinals. O'Brien gave up those rights 2 years after he stepped down as Archbishop of Edinburgh in the face of the allegations.
From Australia to Chile, the sex abuse crisis has dominated the headlines of this papacy. It has been a very difficult year for Francis. He's facing many of these crises around the world.
Lauren, that's right. Just today, Pope Francis accepted the resignation of an Australian archbishop convicted in criminal court of covering up the sex abuse charges, the sexual abuse of children by a priest. And it comes after mounting pressure from ordinary Catholics, priests, and even the Australian Prime Minister. Now, Archbishop Philip Wilson of Adelaide was convicted in May of failing to report to police the repeated abuse of 2 altar boys by a pedophile priest. And there's also the ongoing trial of Cardinal George Pell, a close advisor to the Pope, a bishop in Honduras, closely connected to another papal advisor, Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiga, also resigned in a sexual and financial scandal. And the church in Chile is having its own crisis, Lauren. In May, Francis received the resignations of Chilean bishops in the face of a massive scandal involving accusations of cover-up. Lauren.
We will be on this story and continue in-depth coverage on it. Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Several church leaders are addressing the concerns of the faithful regarding McCarrick's alleged abuses. The president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, says, "I thank the Holy Father for his leadership in taking this important step. It reflects the priority the Holy Father places on the need for protection and care for all our people, and the way failures in this area affect the life of the Church in the United States." Cardinal Joseph Tobin says this latest news is a necessary step for the Church to hold itself accountable for sexual abuse and harassment perpetrated by its ministers, no matter their rank. Joining me now is Bishop Michael Olsen of Fort Worth, Texas. Bishop Olsen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren.
On Saturday, you sent a letter to your diocese in Fort Worth calling Archbishop McCarrick's alleged crimes, quote, a violation of trust, and you reassured your diocese that you have zero tolerance for such actions. Why don't we see more of a zero tolerance policy for sexual abuse in the Church?
Well, I think it's not because of a lack of effort on some parts. I really want to speak only on my behalf with regard to that, as far as zero tolerance, which is why I sent the letter and I addressed it to my people and to my priests. And so I think the culture, the dominant culture, is just becoming more and more aware of this. And this does not offer us an excuse, but it really offers us an incentive to be more intentionally cognizant for preventing this sort of thing, and especially to take care of each other and to care especially for the vulnerable.
There were reported financial settlements to alleged victims of Archbishop McCarrick in 2005 and 2007. Why did it take so long for him to be demoted?
I don't know. And I think that's a question at hand that requires explanation, especially given the atmosphere provided by the charter when we weren't supposed to enter into those sort of agreements with regard to minors, but also that it should provide a more transparent atmosphere whereby we are clear with the people who are giving what they have in stewardship to us, and also respectful of those who have been harmed by the Church and not pressured into silence.
If other members of the clergy knew of McCarrick's misconduct, should they be held accountable? Should they be removed?
I think that question needs to be part of an investigation, first and foremost, and that should be adjudicated rightly according to the norms of canon law and the right procedures. But I think that cannot be excluded. And especially if people have sinned and shared in these crimes by omission, that is just as culpable and should be also measured with the same degree of accountability.
Archbishop McCarrick now faces a canonical trial, but what does that do to help victims?
Well, I think look, trust only remains wish or hopes, or actually wish more than hope, unless there can be demonstrated efforts that can be verified to show that there's accountability within a community, be it the community of a society or a community of the Church. And so in the sense that there's accountability for our social responsibility, which is for those who know about these sort of egregious assaults on other people and don't do anything about it or don't say something about it, that they're also held accountable in a proportionate way.
Should the victims... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said, and that cannot be tolerated and it should certainly not be encouraged.
Should the victims receive monetary compensation?
I don't think there's any monetary compensation that can compensate someone for the type of harm that can be done by that. I don't think you can measure that monetarily, but I think that there needs to be the same sort of assessment, whether by the law or that's measured out and according to our judicial means of handling that, if we cannot handle that in other ways.
Should a criminal court be involved from the very beginning?
Criminal court should always be involved where crimes are committed or alleged to have been committed.
Okay. Bishop Michael Olsen of Fort Worth, Texas, thank you for speaking out. We reached out to several members of the hierarchy and didn't receive a response. So we appreciate your time and you speaking out.
I would ask really that we pray, but it's ora et labora, prayer and work together. So thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Olsen. A landmark grand jury report identifies more than 300, quote, predator priests in Pennsylvania. The state Supreme Court says the complete findings will be made public next month. It is part of the state's investigation into clergy child sexual abuse. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announces the Department of Justice is creating a new religious liberty task force. Sessions says it shows the Trump administration is committed to protecting the religious rights of Americans. Last week, the State Department held its first of what will become an annual Religious Freedom Ministerial. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee has been following the administration's commitment to safeguarding religious freedom. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Jeff Sessions announced the new task force while speaking at the Department of Justice's Religious Liberty Summit. He says it's a dangerous movement is trying to get rid of Americans' right to worship. He says religious Americans are no longer an afterthought.
In recent years, the cultural climate in this country and in the West more generally has become less hospitable to people of faith.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions explains why the Department of Justice is forming a new Religious Liberty Task Force. Its aim? To make sure the religious rights of all Americans are upheld.
Many Americans have felt that their freedom to practice their faith has been under attack, and it's easy to see why. We've seen nuns ordered to buy contraceptives. We've seen United States senators ask judicial and executive branch nominees about their dogma.
You know, there's always cracks of light.
The Justice Department welcomed different faith leaders to speak about challenges in their communities. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, who heads the Bishops' Conference on Religious Liberty, says Catholics have made some legal headway. The Little Sisters of the Poor and other religious organizations no longer have to abide by the HHS mandate, a part of Obamacare forcing them to violate their faith by paying for contraceptives. But he says there's more work to be done.
I mentioned in my talk the area of Child Welfare Inclusion Act, which basically says that faith-based agencies in foster care and in adoption ought to be free to be able to place children based on their commitments of faith.
Archbishop Kurtz saying some groups have challenged Catholic and other Christian adoption agencies for not placing children with same-sex couples. He says another big case pending involves the Conscience Protection Act, which is aimed at giving protection to workers so they're not forced to participate in an abortion. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting. Thank you, Wyatt. President Donald Trump threatens to shut down the federal government if Congress doesn't agree to provide additional border security funding. It's the latest demand from the president as he continues his hardline stance against illegal immigration. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president welcomed the Prime Minister of Italy to the White House today, another world leader who shares his position on immigration. But the president is following up on a weekend tweet today warning what might happen if lawmakers don't meet his demands.
I would have no problem doing a shutdown. It's time we had proper border security. We're the laughing stock of the world. We have the worst immigration laws anywhere in the world.
The president is calling for an end to the visa lottery program and chain migration policies, which allow extended family members into the country. Instead, he wants a merit-based immigration system that rewards people with skills And the president also wants to end catch and release, the practice of releasing undocumented immigrants into the U.S. as they await their court date. But today, President Trump also said he had no red line.
I'll always leave room for negotiation, but this has been many years. This isn't just Trump administration. We're new. There's been many years, even decades. We have immigration laws, we have border security, we have all sorts of things going on that it's disgraceful.
By endorsing a potential shutdown, the president is putting himself at odds with members of his own party, many of whom face tough re-election fights this November. Government funding expires at the end of September, just weeks before the midterm elections. Congress won't have much time to act on immigration. The House is in recess and won't return until after Labor Day. Senators are sticking around for most of August, but that's primarily to work on spending bills. Lauren?
The president was also asked about his willingness to meet with Iran. Could that follow his meetings with North Korea and Russia?
Well, President Trump doesn't think Iran is ready to meet, but he's ready to meet with them anytime they want. He said there are no preconditions. He said it would be good for America, good for Iran, and good for the world to resolve our differences. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Jury selection begins tomorrow in the trial of President Trump's former campaign manager. Paul Manafort is charged with tax evasion and bank fraud. He denies the allegations. The case is not expected to provide answers into whether the Trump campaign coordinated with Russia during the 2016 election. Zimbabwe holds its first election since former President Robert Mugabe resigned last year under military pressure. Officials report a high turnout, but the main opposition reported voting delays. The current president promises a credible vote that could bring legitimacy to the southern African country. Mugabe is widely accused of repression and mismanagement during his 37 years in power. Investigators offer no clear cause for the disappearance 4 years ago of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. In their much-anticipated report today, they also do not rule out a third party causing the accident. Officials say they won't know for sure until the wreckage is found. The plane vanished over the Indian Ocean with 239 people on board. Supporters of Muslim rebels gathered yesterday in the Philippines to discuss the land they have been given by President Rodrigo Duterte. The legislation grants Muslims their own region in the southern part of the majority Catholic country. It could end nearly a half-century of violence there. An Islamic leader showed the crowd a signed copy of the law. The United Nations says the landmark deal will bring peace to the area.
El Señor es contigo, bendita eres entre todas las mujeres.
Several thousand people take part Saturday in a peaceful protest against Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega. They prayed the Lord's Prayer and marched with a statue of the Blessed Virgin and banner showing the country's Catholic bishops. More than 400 people have been killed in anti-government protests that began last April. Coming up, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh's crucial meeting on Capitol Hill. And why Pope Francis is talking food. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops begins a novena ahead of the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. It will be prayed every Friday in August and September. Kavanaugh is Catholic. His nomination was welcomed by Catholics and pro-life groups. West Virginia's Joe Manchin is the first Democratic senator to meet with Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Manchin is a possible swing vote in the fight to confirm Kavanaugh. Senator Manchin asked West Virginia residents to send him questions to ask Kavanaugh. Manchin was one of 3 Democrats who voted to confirm Trump's first Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch. Joe Donnelly of Indiana and Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota were the other 2. All 3 are up for re-election in states President Trump easily won in 2016. Joining me now is Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief for The Hill. Bob, let's talk about that meeting today with Joe Manchin. What do you have to say about, whether or not he is going to risk retribution from his own party for supporting Kavanaugh.
It's a tough spot for all these Democrats in Trump-won states, but I think that Manchin, remember, this is a state that Trump won by 42 points. Manchin is currently ahead in his race against Patrick Morrisey, the Republican. I think you're going to see a similar vote that you saw last time you mentioned with Gorsuch, that all Republicans will get on board, and you'll have 2 or 3 Democrats also say, yeah, I'm going to support him. Kavanaugh is going to, barring something at the hearings, he's going to get confirmed.
You heard it here first. Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul announced that he will vote in favor of Kavanaugh, saying the conversation he had with him reinforces his belief that Kavanaugh will, quote, evaluate cases before the Supreme Court from a textual and originalist point of view, and that he will carefully adhere to the Constitution. Paul had said previously he was undecided. So does this bode well for Judge Kavanaugh?
Oh, this is a big vote. There's no doubt about it. Rand Paul had been concerned about the government power, the Fourth Amendment, and Kavanaugh's rulings on that. So Kavanaugh, behind closed doors, he's saying the right things. And that's why if Rand Paul had said, no, I'm going to oppose him, then they would have needed potentially some Democrats. So now I don't think they're going to need any Democrats, which actually frees up the Democrats to vote yes. But, of course, if you vote for Kavanaugh on your Democrat, the liberal base is they're gonna let you have it.
Do we have more intel? It seems to me that you do on which way moderate Republican senators Collins of Maine and Murkowski of Alaska are going to vote. You said you think all 50 will go.
I do. I think now Collins and Murkowski have not yet said that they will vote yes, but they have not expressed skepticism about Kavanaugh. They actually say the feedback they've gotten from their constituents, remember, both voted against the Obamacare repeal bill along with John McCain that basically killed the bill. They've said they've heard a lot more about that issue than Kavanaugh. So I think it's a good bet that both of them will vote yes on Kavanaugh.
And the vote is coming
in this fall. It's after the August recess. Depends on exactly when. There's some speculation it could come even in October, but at least the earliest would be late September.
Thank you so much. Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief for The Hill. Always great to have you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Up next, a milestone for an American on the path to sainthood. And the Pope on your phone. Today is the first ever feast day of Blessed Solanus Casey. The Capuchin friar spent years in Detroit and was beatified late last year. One more miracle is needed for his possible sainthood. This weekend, parishes across Oklahoma celebrated the first feast day for the first U.S.-born martyr, Blessed Stanley Rowther. Pope Francis has sent $12,000 of his own money to refugees from Yemen stranded in South Korea. A Vatican diplomat delivered the gift. He said the Holy Father is praying for the migrants. The money will be distributed to Catholic charities caring for the roughly 500 refugees. And the Holy Father reminds us not to be wasteful with our food.
Questo è un consiglio e anche un esame di coscienza. Cosa si fa a casa col pasto che avanza?
In Sunday's Angelus, the Pope told the pilgrims and tourists gathered in St. Peter's Square that leftovers should be used for another meal or donated to the needy. The Holy Father also urged everyone to combat the shameful crime of human trafficking. Today, the United Nations marks the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. The Vatican has a new app. Vatican Audio can be downloaded for free from the Apple Store and Google Play. It was created by the Vatican's Communications Department, and Pope Francis generally speaks in Italian. So this app allows you to listen to a live, simultaneous translation in 5 languages. I just hope you're not listening to them all at the same time. Okay, I bet you're not. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless.